Wait, pause for a second. Something quiet, something almost invisible has just shifted, and if you've been wondering lately why a certain person keeps lingering in your thoughts in a way you can't quite explain, there's a reason for it. Tonight, somewhere not too far from you, someone said your name in front of them, and instead of the calm, collected reaction they would have given a few months ago, something much smaller, much more revealing, happened on their face. A flicker, a flush, a look they hoped no one caught. Because the truth they've been hiding, even from themselves, is that they've started to feel something for you. And the part that's been stopping them from saying anything is something they're embarrassed to admit out loud. They think you're too far ahead of them. In age, in life, in everything that feels like it should matter. And they don't yet know that none of that is the problem they think it is. If this message speaks to your heart, comment, "I receive this love," like the video, and subscribe for more. Let me set the scene the way it actually unfolded, because the quietness of it is part of what makes it real. It was a casual evening, not a party, not a gathering with stakes, just one of those low-pressure get-togethers where a few people end up in the same place because nobody had a better plan. A small space, warm light, drinks on the table, the kind of music that sits behind the conversation instead of competing with it. Your person was there, blending in the way they usually do, present but not loud, listening more than speaking, the quiet center of a room that doesn't realize it's circling them. And you should know something about how they were feeling that night, before any of this happened. They walked in already a little distracted. Not visibly, not in any way someone could point to, but internally, they'd been carrying you around for weeks, and they didn't have a name for it yet. They'd been replaying small moments. A conversation you had once. The way you laughed at something they said that they thought wasn't even that funny. The way you looked at them like you were actually listening, not just waiting for your turn to speak. They'd been collecting these small things without realizing they were collecting them. And they'd been telling themselves it was nothing. Just admiration. Just respect. Just a normal kind of fondness for someone who's been kind to them. But that story was getting harder to maintain. Stay with this, because there's a deeper emotional layer here than it might seem. They sat down at this gathering, made small talk, did the things they always do, and for the first half hour or so, they were fine. Nothing about you came up. Your name wasn't mentioned. They weren't even consciously thinking about you. The way they describe it later, if they ever described it, was that you were just a soft hum in the background of their attention, the way certain songs play in your head all day without you noticing. And then someone at the table mentioned you. Not in a meaningful way, not in a set-up way, just casually, the way people drop names into conversation when they reconnecting dots. The person speaking didn't know about your person's quiet feelings, didn't know there were any feelings at all, was just talking. And in the middle of whatever they were saying, they made an offhand comment about you, something honest, something specific, something true. And here's what got said, in essence, even if not in these exact words, that you carry yourself with a kind of grounded, settled quality that's rare. That there's a depth to you. That you've lived enough life to know who you are, and it shows. The third party didn't say it as a compliment to your person. They didn't even know your person was holding their breath. They just said it as a fact, the way people sometimes say things that change the temperature of a room without realizing they've done it. And your person felt the words land somewhere they weren't ready for them to land. This is where things quietly began to shift. Their face stayed the same, mostly, but their hand tightened a little around their glass. Their gaze went somewhere just past the shoulder of the person speaking. And in their head, a sentence formed before they could stop it, something close to, yeah, that's exactly it, that's exactly what I noticed. But they didn't say it out loud. Of course they didn't. Because saying it out loud would have meant admitting, in front of everyone, that they'd been thinking about you enough to notice the same things this stranger had just casually pointed out. So they did what they always do. They took a sip of their drink, nodded vaguely, let the conversation move past it. But internally, they were no longer in the conversation. They were somewhere else now, replaying every small moment they had with you, all those little exchanges that they been telling themselves were nothing. The way you handled a difficult situation in front of them once, and how impressed they been without showing it. The way you given them advice without making them feel small for needing it. The way you didn't perform, for them or for anyone. They noticed all of it. They just been pretending they hadn't. And now somebody else had said it out loud, in their own words, without knowing the weight they were placing into the room. And your person couldn't pretend anymore that what they felt about you was just admiration. This is the part they still trying to understand. Because here's where the shyness comes in. Here's where the thing they don't know how to say to you starts to take shape. They are younger than you. Maybe by a few years. Maybe by more. The number itself isn't the point. The point is that, in their head, you exist on a different rung of life than they do. You've done things they haven't done yet. You've been through things they still becoming acquainted with. You move through the world with a kind of settled certainty that they admire so much it almost intimidates them. And the thought that's been turning in their head, quietly, in the days leading up to this night, is something like, what would someone like that even want with someone like me? It's not a confident thought. It's not a bold thought. It's a small, vulnerable one. The kind of thought that doesn't want to be examined too closely, because examining it might require them to do something about it. What happens next isn't loud, but it changes more than they realize. After the third party's words landed, your person reached for their drink and finished it earlier than they meant to. They asked for another. Not because they wanted to be drunk, but because they wanted to feel slightly less alert, slightly less aware of what was happening inside them. The feeling they were trying to outrun was the feeling of being caught, not by anyone at the table, but by themselves. Caught in the act of feeling something they hadn't given themselves permission to feel. They started thinking about a specific moment with you. Something small. Something unimportant on the surface. The two of you had been talking about something, maybe something practical, maybe something completely random, and at one point you said something that wasn't meant to be profound, but it was. And they remembered how, in that moment, they felt this small click inside them, like a door they didn't know was there had quietly opened. They didn't act on it at the time. They didn't even fully register it. They just kept talking, kept the conversation flowing, kept the surface of things smooth. But they remembered the click. And tonight, sitting at this table with a stranger's accurate description of you still echoing around their chest, they remembered that the click hadn't gone away. It had just been waiting. If this resonates, let it settle in you. There's something deeply human about somebody noticing a feeling for the first time and immediately trying to talk themselves out of it because the timing or the optics feel wrong. Because here's what they've been doing in the weeks since that small click happened. They've been quietly watching themselves, noting how often they think about you, tracking how their mood shifts when you cross their mind, catching the way their attention sharpens when somebody else mentions you. And every time they noticed one of these signs, they explained it away, told themselves it was a phase, told themselves they were reading too much into a normal kind of respect, told themselves that someone like you wasn't somebody they could feel this way about, because, and here's the heart of it, they convinced themselves you wouldn't take them seriously. That's the wound underneath the whole thing. That's the actual reason they haven't said anything. Not the age gap, exactly. The fear of being seen as too young to be taken seriously by someone they quietly come to admire deeply. Stay with this, because the next layer is the part they haven't been able to face on their own. What the third party said tonight, about your settled, grounded quality, exposed something specific. It exposed the gap between how your person sees you and how your person sees themselves. They listened to that comment and immediately, without meaning to, compared their own life to that description. And they came up short, in their own head. Not because they actually are short of anything, but because admiration without confidence has a way of warping your sense of scale. And here's what they've been missing, what tonight is beginning to crack open for them. The very fact that they admire you the way they do is not a barrier. It's the foundation. It means they actually see you. It means they not flattening you into a fantasy or projecting some idea onto you. It means they taken in who you really are, slowly, over time, and arrived at something genuine. But they don't quite trust that yet. They still think the gap between you matters more than the connection between you. They still think you see them as a kid playing at something serious. And so they hold their tongue. They keep the feelings filed somewhere they can deny they exist. This is where understanding slowly begins. Halfway through the night, they pulled out their phone. Not to text anyone, just to do something with their hands. They scrolled through it, mindlessly, the way people do when they trying to occupy their attention. And at one point, they don't even fully remember doing it, they found themselves hovering on a thread that had your name in it. Not opening it, just looking, just letting the name sit there in the small preview window, just feeling whatever they felt about it, briefly, before scrolling away. That brief look, that 10-second pause, was the closest they came tonight to admitting anything to anyone. Even if no one was watching, even if it was only to themselves. And what they were really doing, in that moment, was rehearsing a sentence they don't know how to say, trying out what it would feel like to be honest, trying on the version of themselves that's brave enough to tell you. They couldn't hold the rehearsal for long, but the fact that they did it at all is significant, because a few months ago, they wouldn't have. A few months ago, the feeling would have been too small, too easy to dismiss. Tonight, it's gotten too big to keep ignoring. What happens next is subtle, but it's the part that lasts. Their mood shifted for the rest of the night. Not in a way anyone would catch, just in the way somebody gets a little quieter, a little more interior, a little more thoughtful. They laughed at the right moments. They participated in the conversation. They didn't seem off, externally, but internally, they were doing the slow work of letting themselves feel something they'd been refusing to feel. They started thinking about specific things they'd been telling themselves about you. The little dismissals. They probably don't see me that way. I shouldn't even let myself think about this. They at a different place in life. And tonight, those sentences started to lose their grip. Not because they suddenly felt confident, but because hearing your name said out loud, in front of them, by someone who described you exactly the way they'd been quietly experiencing you, made the whole thing feel less like a secret crush and more like a real recognition of something real. There's a difference between liking the idea of someone and seeing someone clearly. Tonight made them realize they doing the second thing. And the second thing scared them more than the first. If you felt this shift too, you already understand. There's a moment when fondness crosses a line and becomes something you have to take responsibility for, and it's never as comfortable as you hoped it would be. There's a verse that comes to mind quietly here. Love is patient, love is kind, it is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. And the reason it lands here is that what your person is feeling is, in its small, hesitant way, an early form of all of those things. They being patient with you, even from a distance, because they not pushing. They being kind because they not making it your problem. They not boastful, because they not announcing themselves. And they not proud, because the whole reason they haven't said anything is that they sitting with something that feels more like awe than entitlement. But all of that quiet kindness, all of that careful restraint, also means you have no idea this is happening. And that's why this video found you tonight. Not so you act on it. Not so you reach out. Not so you start trying to figure out who it is. But so you know. What's been moving toward you is real. It's just slow. It's just careful. It's just learning to trust itself. Their feeling for you isn't a passing thing. It hasn't faded with distance. It hasn't dissolved when they tried to talk themselves out of it. It's still there, getting clearer, getting more defined, getting harder to ignore. And tonight gave them something they didn't have before, outside confirmation. Tonight, they realized that the qualities they've been quietly drawn to in you aren't things they invented. They things other people see in you too. Which means their instinct about you isn't a fantasy. It's accurate. And that accuracy is going to be very hard for them to walk away from. This is where the perspective shifts permanently. Your person isn't going to come barreling toward you. That's not who they are, and even if it were, they'd be too uncertain to do it confidently right now. What they going to do, what they already started doing, even if you can't see it yet, is slowly close the distance. In small ways. A little more eye contact. A little more presence. A little more leaning in when you speak. They might not say anything explicit for a while. The shyness about the age gap is going to keep slowing them down. But the feeling itself isn't going anywhere. It's getting stronger underneath their hesitation, not weaker. So in the meantime, your only job is to be yourself the way you've already been. The qualities they've been quietly noticing in you are not performances. They not things you have to keep doing to keep the feeling alive. They who you are. And that's exactly what's been drawing them in. The settledness. The depth. The way you don't need to prove anything. The way you carry your years like they earned rather than worn. You don't have to wait for anything. You don't have to wonder when. You don't have to track this in your head. The unfolding is already happening, in a place you can't quite see, in someone who isn't yet brave enough to tell you. And one day, maybe sooner than you think, maybe later, the courage is going to catch up to the feeling. And when it does, what comes out of their mouth won't be a calculated speech. It will be something honest, slightly clumsy, slightly self-conscious about the age gap they're still learning to set down, and underneath all of that, completely real. Until then, hold this gently. Don't squeeze it. Don't analyze it into the ground. Don't try to figure out who it is and corner them about it. Just let yourself know what you now know, that someone who admires you more than they've admitted has been carrying you with them quietly, and tonight, in front of strangers, the truth about you escaped from somebody else's mouth and hit them where it counts. They still figuring out what to do with what they felt. They still trying to convince themselves it's reasonable to feel this way. They still navigating the small, embarrassing tenderness of being a little younger than the person they've started to look at differently. But the feeling has roots now. It's not something they can talk themselves out of anymore. And what they beginning to realize now, is something they can't walk away from anymore. Not this time.